Do you want to start catching fish on a spinnerbait but don't know where to start? We're going to talk about that.
Welcome back to another episode of 5-Minute Fish Talk.
You know what this is right here? This is a fresh cup of coffee, and I'm very excited about it. But you know what else I'm excited about? I've got 5 minutes on this time of here, and you know what that means. Boop! It's time to get real. Today we are talking about spinnerbaits, my friends. They've been around since the beginning of time. Cavemen caught fish on these things, but you know what? They're still producing today, so we got to talk about them. But what is a spinnerbait? As most of you may know, it is essentially a little wire deal with a little jig head on it, whether that's lead or tungsten, doesn't really matter. Obviously, it's got a hook. A lot of times it has a skirt, doesn't have to, and then what gives it its name is the blades right here, which spin, obviously. So when you cast it out there and you start winding it back, those things create a lot of flash. You can see them from a mile away, but not only that, the bass can feel them in their lateral line because it's really creating a lot of vibration down there. So obviously when we start to think about that, it can be really, really good for low light conditions. Whether you got dirty water or you got a lot of wind, it doesn't necessarily matter. It can be great for those situations. But where should you throw it? How do you retrieve it? For me personally, I think a spinnerbait can be fished in thousands of different conditions. These things can work pretty much anywhere, but I personally like to throw them around a lot of timber. I like to throw them around laydowns. I like to throw them around wood in general. I tend to throw them more so in stained water than I would clear, but it does work in all conditions. Obviously, you can throw them in other places though too. You can throw them around docks. You can throw them around grass beds. If the grass is coming up off the bottom but not all the way to the top, you can reel it right over the top, and that can be deadly as well. So what I want to really say here is that you can throw these in pretty much any condition and catch fish. Personally, I like to hone in on a few different ones, and I would just suggest that you try throwing them in different conditions and figure out what you like best. I'm not going to tell you when and where to throw them. As far as forage goes and kind of what you want to imitate with a spinnerbait, 90% of the time for me when I'm throwing a spinnerbait, I'm trying to imitate a shad. So I tend to throw colors like white or chartreuse. But obviously you can try to imitate something like a bluegill. This is actually a custom spinnerbait that I made back in high school because I had mad wizard skills in the lure shop, but that's besides the point. I don't even know if I've ever really caught fish on the thing, but it does look cool. But these things can really vary. What I wanted to talk about next is actually blade configuration, because that can probably be a little bit confusing. Here we have two what they call willow leaf blades, and then here we have one small Colorado blade. Now essentially the willow leaf blade is going to spin a lot faster, and so it's going to probably create a little bit less vibration. Whereas the Colorado blade is going to allow you to actually keep the bait in place longer because it's going to thump a lot slower and it's going to create a bigger vibration. There are stuff that they call Indiana blades, and that's basically a hybrid of the two. It kind of looks like a teardrop, and you can kind of just say that it is somewhere in between those two. So for me, generally speaking, I throw the willow leaf blades 90% of the time. Even in the dirtiest water, you can get away with these. But when it comes down to it, if I do want to throw a Colorado style blade, the times where I personally like to throw them are in areas where the water is incredibly dirty. Now this is a pretty small blade. I don't happen to have one ready and handy that really showcases what I would prefer, but in a dirty, dirty water, I would be using the biggest Colorado or Indiana blade that I can possibly find. And I'm talking about like mud water. I'm not talking about just kind of stained. I'm talking about as dirty gets. That's the situation where, in my experience, those bigger blades can really, really pay off. Now, that's pretty much what I had to say for you. I think you should go out and experiment with these things. I don't think there's really a wrong way to fish them. Obviously, if you keep them moving, they're going to continue to do their thing down there. But if you do want to see me actually put a spinnerbait to use, I think you can get a lot of value out of this video right here. This one, I really went out to the lake. I tried to figure out what they were doing. I started finding fish that were really aggressively chasing shad, and I hammered them on a spinnerbait. So I would suggest watching that video next. Otherwise, you know what I'm going to say next, right? Have yourself a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch you next time.